Some viewers may find this content disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Ernie, Davieau, yes, the Squatch Whisperer. This must mean it is time for another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on StarFox Radio. Yet, please allow me to feed. Much better sometimes after a long sleep. All I can think about is the primal urge to feed. Without further ado, yes, it is time for Ernie and I to take a walk into the darkness. My creatures of the night, once again, it is time for Midnight Lycanthropy here in the Fox Den on Star Fox Radio. Tonight, we have a friend of the North American Dogman Project, Ernie, aka the Sasquatch Whisperer, and he is going to dive in to the Dogman topic with us and pick apart some interesting theories that are floating around. Ernie, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm doing pretty amazing tonight, actually, Ken. How about yourself? You doing all right?
Glad to hear that. Yeah, really good actually. Bruins got a big win last night, and I'm caught up on a lot of research at the moment. I've been banging out some logos for the NADP and tagging up our website. So yeah, staying busy but doing good.
Beautiful. Glad to hear that.
What's new your way?
Well, not too much. I mean, we get a little bit of a cold snap here, and my wife's been planting she'd been planting the garden, but she came up with a new thing on her garden that's actually kind of like Tesla connected. It's actually a copper coil that you put in the ground, and it's supposed to do something for the plants, but let's call it an experiment at this point to see what happens. Something that we heard about, if it actually makes the plants grow quicker. So that's another rabbit hole right there, I think, for growing people.
That's awesome. That's cool. You'll have to keep myself posted on how that works out for you. That sounds pretty interesting for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I think tonight we wanted to talk about, or you wanted to talk about the Dogman Bigfoot connection a little bit there, and whether they're both equally, we'll call them mean or not mean.
Yes, I did want to dive into that. And there's a lot of different stuff floating around out there. As I've spoken with others, and as you and I were speaking about, a lot of people like to think that every sort of interaction is this crazy science fiction, rip apart, madness type encounter. And I'm sure some are, and we have been able to verify a few. But for the most part, it's a quicker encounter, and a lot of people are misunderstanding that. So it's important to differentiate what's going on and also get the insight from others such as yourself as to what you believe is occurring.
Yeah, it really is an interesting subject. I mean, one of the first ones that ever got me started on that was the Martin Grove from the Land Between the Lakes, and listening to his account on what happened down there. If anybody's not familiar with this, they should probably listen to that. I find that no matter what eyewitness I talk to, they themselves might not even be aware of the some of the important evidence that's in their encounter that might correlate with something else. And part of Martin Grove's encounter with the Dogman, and it was not a good encounter for him or his partner or the gentleman that was camped out pretty close to them. They got out of there. But my point is, one of the things that I picked up is Martin, when he was headed back to his campsite that his buddy was at, he was flanked and he had one on each side of him that he could hear, but he didn't recognize it as that happening. And he heard several sounds. One of the sounds he heard was a whistle. And that really struck a chord with me because during my encounter myself with a Sabe, I prefer Sabe, some people prefer Sasquatch. What had happened was I actually saw, I was extremely close to this individual, and it whistled, and it sounded just like a man whistling. And towards the end of his Martin Groves encounter, he didn't realize that they could have been involved, and I think they are very involved. And what he pointed out was when they were leaving in the truck, okay, very hastily leaving, and the Dogman were actually basically attacking them, attacking the campsite, and shots were fired. As he's seen, I believe it was two of them standing in a field, two of the Sasquatch. And it seems predominant in that area that they have a lot of sightings on one side of the land between the lakes of Dogman and on the other side of Sasquatch. Now, the interesting thing is that monkeys in India are known for stealing puppies and actually raising the puppies because the puppy becomes acclimated to the monkey and like family and will start guarding the monkey as it gets older. And I started thinking that there was a correlation between like a symbiotic relationship going on there in a way, because there's an account here in Ohio. I probably going to might get this wrong, but I think it was the Moderna encounter of a Sasquatch, and a large portion of the population of this town actually seen this Sasquatch. But the strange thing was that they had also seen this Sasquatch, what appeared to be a very large wolf-like animal also. Now, that being said, people think that, the Sasquatch can be really mean. I'm looking at it as, because of my encounter, is they are not mean, but they are highly intelligent from the evidence that's being presented to me by people like members of the 400 or the founders of the 400, namely Randy Harrington and Shane Carpenter, I believe his name is. They are showing high intelligence in there, and I believe that they work together. The Sasquatch themselves are not violent by nature. I mean, anybody can, if we even look at humans. I think that what's going on there, in my personal opinion, is people, because a pine cone's thrown at them, or a walnut, or an acorn, or whatever, it seems to escalate every single time in the encounters to the point is where it may be a rock or a bluff charge or whatever. I think well, I should say I do know that there's family units and then there's clans, but that's for another night perhaps, that we can talk about that and how I know that based on my encounter. I believe the Sasquatch wants them out of the area, and whether it be because they're encroaching upon their food source, or perhaps maybe the family unit, or perhaps even mating season, and they don't want the humans around. So they try to get you out of that area. A lot of people will claim that they outran them back to their vehicle. There's absolutely no way, and I'm basing this upon my encounter, what I personally seen. It was on a hunting trip, and of course I've shot many deer, and I've shot deer on the run. One of them could easily outrun a deer. very easily outrun a deer. Now, that being said, I doubt very much that there's a human being out there on this planet that can outrun a deer. We're talking 38 plus miles an hour. So they're basically escorting you back to your vehicle. Now, the dog man, I've heard of where it came really close to an attack, but the majority of them, people claim that they're a lot meaner than what people assume a Sasquatch is, to the point of where they are definitely attacked and the outcome is not very good at all.
Yeah, no, that's actually a very valid point. That's kind of where I fall into the category of I personally don't really think that if a dogman has an opportunity to snag somebody, that it's going to be a good interaction. It's no different than any sort of predator. I mean, a grizzly bear might not necessarily go out of its way if it has moose and things, but if you still walk out in the middle of a field and it has a chance to snag you, is it not? I mean, it's no different than the great white shark. It's not necessarily going out of its way, but if you happen to fall into the water as it's hungry, of course it's going to eat you. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand that aspect of we have the theory that potentially type 3 cave hyenas are still in existence, and our environmentalist Colleen has tapped on that. And if you look at where the people are missing in the cave systems, well, if that type 3 hyena took you and pulled you in there, or any sort of dog man, well, of course you're not going to be found. And that's where I kind of think there's other stuff that's occurring with these missing people, but I do believe the dogmen are playing a part into that. But I also would be intrigued to hear your thought as if you think the Sasquatch would be encouraging that or would be involved in a different way on that level.
That's a really interesting question because again, I've got to go back to the Martin Groves. There is what were these Sasquatch doing there? And he's not the only one that actually have seen them in the same area, like they were watching this dog man or whatever. We would have to measure an intelligence level first. And I know that science is going to say, well, the best way to measure an intelligence is put a mirror up. Many people have seen that before, put a mirror up in front of an animal, and if the animal starts grooming itself, it shows awareness, and that awareness shows intelligence. I can tell you right now during my encounter, and it is out there, that this thing shows an exceptional level of intelligence, not just speaking to the other one in what would be referred to as the Sierra sounds by Ron Moorhead, but also it's also referred to as like samurai chatter. Okay. But this one, that the first one that I encountered that morning, it was actually hunting with more than one other one, and it was set on a pinch point. But when it approached me, it basically used like a primitive sign language, not anything that a monkey would do or a gorilla would do. And I know a lot of people, I've heard it many times, they go, well, what about Coco the gorilla? Well, first of all, Coco the gorilla was taught by us. I It appears that these beings, these Sabe people, have that capacity to teach each other that. They know us very well. In the animal kingdom, you'll see deer, female deer, take their does up, and we used to see this a lot on our property to teach them about human beings so they could practice their flag. They call it flagging when they raise their tail because it's all white underneath. That's why they're called white tails, and would alert the rest of the deer and then teach them how to run away, that you should alert to those human beings. There are several cases out there of the Sasquatch actually being around campers or big campsites. And one of them is in Hawken Hills. There's an encounter there with a family that was having a birthday party. And it seemed that these things would throw little pine cones or whatever. Very, very intriguing to get a reaction out of the people. Now, where I hate to keep going back on my encounter, but there are many encounters in that area historically, and several of them happen to be there. Let's see, two Boy Scout camps there and a YMCA camp. And there's a lot of legend in that there too, but it seems that there was a family unit of them around there that I have taken information from several eyewitnesses on seeing 3 or 4 of them together. That being said, it was enough of an area to for them to learn about human beings, and the way this one approached me, it definitely knew that I had a weapon on me, and it got me to lower my weapon by using simple sign on me. It was a lot of people say, well, why didn't you shoot it? It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't going to attack me like a bear. But that all that being said, you're looking at something with a level of intelligence that is far beyond a dog. If people say, well, are they up around our level of intelligence? Well, probably not, but spiritually, they're beyond us. I believe that very strongly. Spiritually, they're way beyond us. They used to trade with the Native Americans, and just about any Native American, we'll call them nations that you speak to, or any of their elders, if they're willing to speak to you, they'll tell you the same exact thing. Now, they have their horror stories, but let's, put that into perspective. Is they'll say they were cannibalistic. Well, in order to put that into perspective, we have to take a look at the Native Americans, whether people want to think so or not. And I'm sure a lot of the elders from these different nations will clarify this for people, that there were several nations of Native Americans that did indeed do cannibalism, historically written down, if you decide to go down that rabbit hole and look at it. That being said, we can't go and be blaming the Sabe people for doing something like that when some of the indigenous people were indeed doing that also. So the only thing that we have is the Dogman is from some of the witness reports that I've taken is a real thing. Some of them say they can go through portals, with the Dogman. Some people say that the Sasquatch can. Well, a moose can disappear in the woods. Let's just say that didn't happen to me. Is these things basically ran off, in a flanking maneuver on me when they could have gone through a portal. They didn't need to set up. And I'm just putting into perspective for the people listening, is they didn't need to poof themselves through a portal and grab a deer. Obviously, they had to do it the old-fashioned way and drive the deer into a pinch point. Up until about 3 years ago or 4 years ago, even, people never thought they got in trees, and they were convinced that they didn't eat meat. Not true. They absolutely do eat meat, and they absolutely can get into a tree and do get into the trees. They don't have a need to carry a weapon because they are a weapon. They are huge, and they could use a boulder or a rock. They could probably pitch a bowling ball at you at 90 miles an hour. I'm pretty sure that would hurt a lot more than your average everyday rock that a human could throw. But that's my opinion on that. The intelligence value. So you've got something of a level that's so far beyond the dog man, because nobody's heard the dog man talk or seen him do sign language or anything else. They seem to be like a guard dog, like a very vicious animal, you know. So that's what I think is going on there, Kenny.
Very interesting, and I appreciate that input for sure. When it comes to the sign language and the hand gestures, what's super interesting about that too, when I read back in the historical documentations of Alexander the Great and Herodotus with the cynocephali, the same thing. They were unable to speak, but they did the hand gestures like that in a form of sign language to communicate, and they also traded with some of the merchants within the smaller villages. And also Jody covered a case back in like 2001 when he was over in Iraq about merchants that were speaking of cynocephali, like creatures coming down from the mountains and trading with the merchants as well. And they were unable to speak, but they could yip and growl and do sign language type hands. So it's super intriguing you said that, because there's also other examples of, like I just mentioned, the cynocephali doing that. And that leads me actually into my next statement, then question for you. I do believe intellect is a funny thing because humans like to just automatically think we are superior to every other animal. We're probably the only animal species that thinks we're better than other animals. So just because we can bust open a computer or play an Xbox or use your cell phone or draw a picture, we find that to be intellectual. Well, I have a pet squirrel that hangs out with other squirrels outside. And for example, I'm just going to use them. Okay. People, like I said, think we're so intellectual. Let's show me the average human being that could stay outside for a winter, make your own little home, make your food, store your food, gather your food. You're not going to a grocery store and survive. Sure, there's probably a few of us that could, yet the majority could not. So, is that not a form of intellect to be able to do all that? Gather your food, insulate your home. Yes, it's intellectual. And when it comes to the Sabe, as you like to say, I do believe they are superior in intellect to the dogmen. I do believe the dogmen are smart. I mean, I have so many cases of them setting traps and smiling at people and banging on windows and trying doors, yet they still have that animalistic side, meaning I think has probably got their hands on them now, which is why you're seeing all these different variations because we know there is animal experimentation that does exist. And if you put down steak or food sources, well, at the end of the day, the dog man knows it's walking into that trap, but it's still yum, yum, yum. Look at raccoons. One of my friends had to relocate a few of those. Super smart creatures. Yet you watch one of them watch their buddy get caught because he wanted the marshmallow and cat food so much. Sometimes they're able to get their buddy out and they escape. Yet other times their buddy does the same thing and goes in and gets the food source, but their intellect has already been measured and we know they're smart. And that's basically how I believe the dogman is. And as you approached with the Sabe, yes, I think they are way more hominoid in regards of having the intellect of being civilized, where I don't think the dogman cares about that. I think they have enough of the intellect where they can mess with you and it's funny and humorous to them. Yet, as I just stated to you, I believe they have been caught by the guy. And in some of the cases, I've heard of indigenous people as well as just campers speaking of dogmen and Sasquatch clashing in battles, and usually always seemingly that the Sasquatch would not come out positively on these clashes, that the dogmen seem to potentially get the best of them. What are your thoughts on that? Do you feel that a Bigfoot would be able to just completely wipe a dogman or vice versa? Or do you think that they're going to be like any other predator? A bear, if it knows there's a pack of wolves around, it's not necessarily afraid of it, but it's not going to walk right over there unless it has to.
That's an interesting question. I like your approach on the analogy between the squirrels and stuff. That is very interesting because we do know that the Sabe people did trade, so they had their intelligence levels beyond that. As far as an actual fight going on between the two of them, I don't know how much of the dog man can actually use its front legs. I mean, I've heard that it has hands or fingers or whatever, but I can tell you this, that the part of the dog man obviously would be its teeth, its head. And
Hmm.
I think that the Sabe, um, being the more intelligent of the two, wouldn't take one on single-handedly because I think that the level of intelligence for the dog man might be somewhere around the pack mentality. If the Sabe were to approach something like that, it would be because they had crossed their boundaries or the dog man had crossed their boundaries and a little fight ensued. But in either case, the Sabe wouldn't be by themselves. And based on my encounter, I can assure you that these Sabe people, when they took the deer on the other side of the stone wall, they were using stones. They were using boulders off of that stone wall. That was an intelligence value. I don't think the dog man is going to be doing. It's going to be relying on its canines, and they were using limbs, not just branches. They were using limbs. So if we look at it like that, then I think that in an open area with boulders and good sized limbs hanging around, I think that the Sabe would beat it. Okay, as long as it could avoid the canines, that it definitely would happen because it appears that they might be about both the same weight, but the Sabe is by far stronger, like supernaturally stronger from some of the things that they've been reported doing, breaking not just tree limbs off, but actually snapping like 6-inch round trees, which the average human being probably couldn't snap a, a 1-inch round tree. They'd have a tough time doing 1 inch, never mind a 6-inch tree. So I think that's what's going on there. And I think that I think that you're onto something there with we don't want to say the, okay. So
The Alphabet Boys.
the alphabet boys is they've been horsing around with DNA for a long time, and I've been hearing a lot about people's encounters and certain noises happening around there, and then certain people showing up. I really think that there's something really going on there. Most definitely, is the DNA is being messed with on them. Maybe it's their super soldiers or whatever, but that's something to when you're taking an encounter to keep your ears open when somebody says, "Yeah, I heard like a metal clanging noise," but yet nobody can identify that metal clanging noise, which is very interesting in my opinion, because I know being in the military, I had a friend that was in K9, and what they would do is they would use a lot of dog trainers is a clicker or some kind of a noise to alert the dog or get the dog to do something. And it seems to be affiliated a lot in like the Martin Grove story. He heard like a metal clang. He couldn't identify it. That would be something interesting to play different sounds, to get a sound effect person to try to duplicate different things and have them listen to it. And so they could say, yeah, that's the noise. And maybe somebody could come up with something. But I think you're spot on that. I think that there's DNA being messed with. Let's face it, our DNA's been messed with, Kenny. We have a splice in our DNA that goes back, what, 10,000 years or whatever? How the heck did a splice get into our DNA? You know, and the DNA from the Sabe is that appears to also have been somehow spliced in a way. So why couldn't they take a cave hyena and mix it with something else? Because they've been doing it. They've genetically created clones. So why not, right?
1000%. Why not? Correct. And to touch base on what you were saying, I agree with all of that. When you were talking about the weapons, I've heard cases of hunters coming across grizzly bears in the forest that basically have had their head smashed in by a large boulder. And that would make a lot of sense that the Sabe would be able to do that. And also, I think a lot of people are under the misconception that dogmen are super comfortable up on two legs, and I tend to disagree. And we're working on something right now where we have somebody that specializes in biometrics and that is creating a 3D digital dogman based off of our type 1 encounters that we have in our reports. And picture kind of potentially how when a grizzly bear is running, right, its front legs are obviously longer than its back. And you
Yep.
know how sometimes it pushes itself up, correct? And
Yep.
it pushes himself up with its legs now, but it's uncomfortable. The dogman, yes, is comfortable up on two legs, and now it can use its front arms as arms or front legs, however people would like to describe that. Yet, in almost 70% of the cases where people are able to actually see it run away or retreat or actually get a good section or good images of its bipedal or quadrupedal pattern, they can see that it's pushing itself up and down. It's going back and forth. It's not just the whole time running on its back legs. So I tend to think it's probably more comfortable on all fours, yet it's able to go bipedal. And there's some other people that say they've heard it popping joints as it's almost like potentially not comfortable in that position. Yeah, I've only heard that a few times. We tend to, I shouldn't even say we, there are probably other people within our organization that feel different. So I will say I tend to believe that it is doing the back and forth. It's going quadrupedal to bipedal. And obviously, it's more menacing if it can push itself up on two legs like a bear, if it needs to look around. Yet, going up against a Sabe, it's probably going to be on all fours. And it's just going to get like destroyed. So, no, that's very interesting in regards with that. Yet we are coming to a close here. Are there any other potential theories you have on what we've spoken about or that you want to touch base on before we do let you get back to the busy night you have?
Yeah, well, you just hit on two good points right there. Is being a fighter and stuff like that before a martial arts fighter is sometimes I would look at individuals like I'm not going to be able to take them on standing up. They've got too much knowledge standing up. I've got to bring them to the ground and use my knowledge on the ground to beat them. That being said, we looked at cavemen. Cavemen could take a mastodon. Cavemen could take a saber-toothed tiger. They figured it out, So I think that the dogman would be at a disadvantage, if it went down to all fours. I mean, I don't think that it would be as fast or as agile or be able to outthink a Sabe, you know. That was a really good point right there. I mean, if you can't beat somebody standing, take them to the ground, and a bear, it is ironic that a bear will try to fight the other bear on the ground, and then they go to a standing position, but they need each other really to try
Mm-hmm.
to subdue the other one to bring them down and get that bite on them. That's exactly what a dog man would have to do. It would have to get control of the upper body to bring it down to get a bite on the neck. Otherwise, it's going to be an extreme disadvantage. It's either going to go for the shot and succeed or not succeed by missing that shot.
Whereas on a person or a deer is going to be able to easily use its body weight to take you down. You are right. A Sasquatch or Sabbath is way more girthy. Dogmen, I mean, no one's really got their hands on one, but it seems like around 200, 400 pounds, give or take. So as I said, if it's coming up on a deer or myself or yourself, it's going to be able to pull that whole bear hug, I'll use that term, and take you down. Yet on something, if it tried to do that potentially against a grizzly bear or a Sabe, it's not going to be able to over dominate like that. I actually had a game warden in Maine speak about a case where he saw a dog man pull that tactic on a smaller black bear. But let's keep in mind a black bear, keyword smaller as well, is not even close to as girthy or massive as a grizzly bear. And an adult 6 to 8 foot dog man could, probably wreck a juvenile black bear. And he said the black bear bit down on the dogman's leg, and the dogman was not very happy with that and immediately started shredding the bear's face with his claws. And he said the bear shrieked, dropped to the ground, and the dogman just disposed of it, picked him up, chucked the bear off the tree. And then the warden said, as he was watching this all through his scope, the thing whipped its head towards him and he fired off a couple of shots into the air and it ran off. But just, in that instance, it's fighting something that probably on all fours is around the same size or maybe a little bit bigger, but a black bear is not equipped with that full arsenal at that age to really take on a full dominant dog man. So no, that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Black bears just don't get that big. You're looking at like the one that the Sabe that I seen there, it was north of 500 pounds, and some of them have been reported up around, 11, 12 feet, and they got to be up over 1,000 pounds. And that's 1,000 pounds of something that's extremely fit that can fight and can use weapons against you. So, yeah, that's an impressive account right there. Even though it was against a small black bear, it's like any animal learning how to fight, with dogs even or cats practicing. At first, they're no good at it when they're small, when they're babies. They have to get that knowledge and fight other ones. And that's quite possibly if that dog man there actually had a few fights under his belt, knew what to do.
No, you touched on a very good point with that as well. I mean, just the size differential, 400, 800 pound. Look at the chimpanzee. What are they? 6 times stronger than a human being? And I mean, I'm not comparing a human being to a dog man, but I'm just saying. So now picture a Sasquatch. Like, it's definitely going to be a massive difference in comparison of strength. And also, as you mentioned too, animals teach each other things. And usually the animals that learn are the ones that were smart enough to either avoid what they were taught or have not yet to be presented by that. There's examples of gorillas taking apart traps that poachers have set up. There's certain groups of orcas that have figured out how to just completely demolish great white sharks. Yet in other parts of the world, they haven't seen that behavior, which means obviously they can be taught that. And now they're seeing those pods that started off with two of them doing that growing, which means other ones are learning that behavior as well. So just in general, like I had stated, people really need to step back and look outside the box and just realize there's a ton of things that, as much as we like to think we know everything, we really don't. And tonight was a really great conversation with you, man. And I appreciate you stopping by. And I definitely, at some point, when you get a little bit more time, would like to get you on and pick your brain a little bit more and also dive into more of your theories on potentially what's going on between the Dogman and the Sabe.
That would be fantastic. I would love doing that.
Thank you for everyone who once again stopped by for another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on Starfox Radio. If you did enjoy this episode, please like, subscribe, and share it. Feed the algorithm. And until next time, stay safe out there.